What if the very place you built with your own hands turned against you? And what if you were the last to know? The doors of the hotel opened with a soft creak, the air inside cold and impersonal, like a space that had forgotten its purpose. Catherine Wilson, a woman who had built this empire from the ground up, stood still, unnoticed by the bustling staff around her. Her eyes scanned the room, no recognition, no welcome, just a sharp, unspoken dismissal. The silence that followed was deafening, as though she were invisible, even in her own domain. As she stood at the front desk, her heart heavy with the weight of this silent injustice, a question lingered in the air. How many times must one prove their worth before they are truly seen? Catherine Wilson stood at the front desk, her fingers lightly tapping on the counter as she waited for any acknowledgement. The soft hum of the lobby felt foreign, as though it were a place she no longer belonged. Beside her, her 16-year-old daughter, Emily, clutched her bag tightly, her eyes darting around in discomfort. Catherine glanced down at her daughter, who looked up with a forced smile, trying to mask the unease she felt. Behind the counter, Kim Peterson, the receptionist, sat lazily, her eyes fixed on her phone. She barely noticed their presence, the subtle tilt of her head signaling her disinterest. Catherine cleared her throat, a gentle sound, but loud enough to break the quiet tension in the air. "Excuse me," Catherine said, her voice calm but firm. "I have a reservation under Catherine Wilson." Kim didn't even look up. Her fingers continued to scroll lazily across the screen. A few moments passed, and then, as if grudgingly forced to interact, Kim finally spoke. "Yeah, I don't see it," she muttered, barely lifting her gaze. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Catherine blinked, the weight of the words hanging in the air. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't let her frustration show. Instead, she pulled out her phone, tapping the confirmation email and holding it up for Kim to see. "I'm sure," she replied, her voice steady. "This is my reservation." Kim's eyes flickered to the email for only a second before she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "The system doesn't lie," she said dismissively, her attention already drifting back to her phone. "Maybe you booked the wrong hotel." Catherine felt a tightening in her chest, the realization hitting her hard. This wasn't just an error. This wasn't a glitch in the system. This was something much deeper, a reflection of how she, despite all her success, was still being dismissed. And as she glanced at Emily's face, she knew it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the message being sent to her daughter, to the world. "Check again," Catherine said, her voice barely a whisper, but it carried a weight of resolve. Catherine stood silently, the tension in the air thickening with every second. She watched as Kim Peterson's fingers continued to glide across the phone screen, seemingly unaware of her presence. Emily, who had been nervously fidgeting beside her, shifted uncomfortably, clearly noticing the growing distance between them and the service they should have been receiving. The hotel was one of Catherine's prideful achievements, and yet here she was, standing at the counter like an unwanted guest. Her mind raced with memories of past struggles, of moments when she had to fight harder than most simply to be seen. Now it seemed the fight was far from over. "Excuse me," Catherine spoke again, her voice calm but unwavering, careful not to let the frustration she felt slip through. "I've already shown you the confirmation. I have a reservation." Kim finally glanced up, her eyes narrowing slightly as she looked at the email on Catherine's phone, but her gaze quickly flicked away, as if she could not be bothered to give it any real attention. She let out a heavy sigh, one that Catherine could feel deep in her chest. Kim smirked, her lips curling in a way that made Catherine's skin crawl. "I told you," Kim said, her voice dripping with indifference. "The system doesn't lie. I'm sure there's been a mistake." Catherine's mind raced. She had built this hotel from the ground up, yet here she stood, in her own establishment, treated like an outsider. Kim's dismissive tone stung like a sharp slap, and Catherine's heart sank. She had dealt with this type of disrespect before, but it never ceased to hurt. The slight, the tone, the refusal to acknowledge her, it wasn't just bad customer service, it was something deeper. Kim had made a decision the moment she laid eyes on Catherine. In that brief instant, Catherine became invisible, just another black woman walking into a space that was not built for her. "I'm not sure what's going on here," Catherine replied, her voice steady, yet the tightness in her chest was undeniable. "But I've been a loyal customer. You must have my reservation." Emily, who had been quietly watching the exchange, shifted uneasily. She stepped closer to her mother, sensing the discomfort in the air. Kim turned her attention to Emily, giving her a once-over, and then rolled her eyes before answering. "Maybe you made a mistake," Kim said, her tone bordering on mocking. "It happens, but I don't know what you want me to do about it." Catherine's breath caught in her throat. Kim had dismissed her and, worse, belittled her daughter. Emily stood there, her face flushed with embarrassment. It wasn't just the reservation that was missing, it was their dignity, their worth. Catherine could see the toll this was taking on Emily. She could see her daughter shrinking, realizing that her mother's successes meant nothing when they were treated like this. "Check again, please," Catherine said quietly, but with a firmness that cut through the air. She felt a fire building inside of her. She wasn't going to let this slide. Not this time. Not in her own hotel. For the first time, Kim looked up at Catherine with something resembling annoyance. "Fine," she said, tapping lazily at the keyboard, clearly irritated by the request. She glanced at the screen, then back at Catherine, her face unchanged. Nope. Still nothing. Catherine's heart sank, but she forced herself to remain composed. She pulled out her phone and held it up once more, this time showing the confirmation email directly to Kim. "I have my booking right here," she said, her voice quieter now, almost a whisper. "Is this what you're looking for?" Kim barely glanced at the screen. She gave it only a passing acknowledgement, dismissing it as if it were an inconvenience. "Yeah, whatever," she muttered. "Maybe you booked it somewhere else. Happens all the time." Catherine's eyes narrowed. Kim had decided, without a doubt, that Catherine didn't belong here, that her presence was an inconvenience. It was clear now, the treatment wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate action, a judgment that Catherine, despite her accomplishments, was still treated like an outsider. And Kim, a young woman who had no idea who Catherine was, had the audacity to treat her this way. "Check again," Catherine repeated, the words now harder, more insistent. Kim's expression twisted briefly, but she reluctantly began typing again, tapping at the keys in a way that seemed almost like an act of defiance. The air between them crackled with tension, and Catherine could feel the weight of every second, every word. This was no longer just about a reservation. It was about respect. It was about dignity. And Catherine would not let it slip away without a fight. The silence that hung in the air was suffocating, broken only by the clicking of Kim Peterson's fingers as she lazily tapped at the keyboard. Catherine stood still, her eyes never leaving Kim as the seconds dragged on. Emily, standing beside her mother, shifted uncomfortably. It was clear she could feel the tension too, the unsettling weight of being dismissed so easily. Catherine's patience was thinning, the feeling of being invisible gnawing at her more with every passing second. "Are you really telling me there's no record of my reservation?" Catherine asked again, her voice more controlled this time, but tinged with disbelief. She could feel the anger bubbling inside of her, but she kept it in check. Emily watched her mother, sensing the quiet strength Catherine exuded. She had always admired her mother's ability to stay calm, even in the most frustrating situations, but this was different. This was personal. Kim, still not making eye contact, shrugged in response. "I don't know what to tell you. The system says nothing's here. Maybe you booked the wrong hotel." Her words were dismissive, as though her mind had already moved on to something else. Catherine's lips tightened, but she stayed silent for a moment, trying to compose herself. But the more she stood there, the more she realized that Kim wasn't simply unhelpful. She was intentionally ignoring her. This wasn't just about a mistake. It was about Catherine's worth being dismissed, her very existence being downplayed by someone who had already judged her before she even spoke. "I've been coming to this hotel for years," Catherine said, her voice steady now, a quiet force building within her. "I built this place, and I've never been treated like this. Never. Not once." Emily's eyes flickered between her mother and Kim, her expression filled with concern. She could see the way Kim was rolling her eyes as she glanced at the reservation email, as though the situation were beneath her, as though Catherine wasn't even worth the effort to properly check the system. Without a word, Catherine took her phone from her purse and held it up for Kim to see. The confirmation email was there, clear and undeniable. "Here's my booking," she said, her voice now rising slightly with the frustration she had been holding back. "And I know you're not going to tell me the system's broken again. Check it. Now." For the first time, Kim paused, her gaze flicking from the phone to Catherine's face. There was no apology, no surprise, just a lazy sigh, and then a flick of her fingers on the keyboard again. Catherine watched as Kim tried to cover up her own mistake, pretending as if nothing was wrong. After a few more taps, Kim looked up with an expression that might as well have been a smirk. "Nope. Still nothing. Looks like it's a system issue." Her voice was flat, as if she were talking about something trivial, as though Catherine's time and dignity didn't matter at all. The words struck Catherine like a slap. She felt the sharp sting of disrespect, but this time, She wasn't going to let it slide. Not today. Not in her own hotel. The realization hit her hard. Kim wasn't just refusing to help. She was actively ignoring her because of the color of her skin. Catherine had faced prejudice before, but this was different. This was a slap in the face at a place she had built, a place where she had poured her heart and soul. How about this? Catherine's voice was calm, but there was a fire in her words now. You can check it again, or I can check it myself. Her hand hovered over the phone, her thumb hovering over the screen, as if ready to tap into the internal system that would expose Kim's actions. Kim stiffened. For the first time, Catherine saw a flicker of uncertainty in Kim's eyes. The walls of indifference she had built around herself were beginning to crack. But Catherine wasn't done yet. She wasn't just going to let this go. I don't need you to tell me what happens when something is deleted from the system, Catherine added, her voice low but with a sharp edge to it. I know exactly what happens. Kim froze. The color drained from her face as Catherine stepped forward, her presence now impossible to ignore. This wasn't just about a reservation anymore. This was about the respect Catherine deserved. It was about standing up for herself, for her daughter, and for everyone who had been ignored and disrespected like this. Now let's try this one more time, Catherine said, her tone leaving no room for argument. As Catherine Wilson stood there, watching Kim Peterson continue to avoid her gaze, a sense of weariness began to settle deep within her chest. She had seen this before, the cold indifference, the dismissive behavior, but never like this. The anger that had been building inside her now mixed with a quiet sorrow. Catherine had worked her whole life to build something, to prove herself in a world that often overlooked people like her. But here, in her own hotel, in front of her daughter, she was being treated like an outsider, just another black woman trying to take up space where she wasn't welcome. The soft hum of the hotel lobby seemed so far away now, and Catherine's mind drifted back to her childhood. Growing up, her family had always been told that hard work would pay off. That if she just kept her head down and worked harder than everyone else, the world would eventually see her for who she truly was. She had believed it. She had built a career, earned her place at the top, and created this empire from nothing. Yet here she was, standing in front of someone who couldn't even be bothered to acknowledge her humanity, let alone the success she had earned. She glanced down at Emily, her 16-year-old daughter, standing quietly by her side. Emily was watching her, silently absorbing the scene. Catherine's heart ached. She had spent so many years protecting her from the harsh realities of the world, but now, in this moment, Emily was witnessing firsthand what it meant to be treated as less than, simply because of the color of their skin. Emily had grown up in privilege, yes, but it wasn't a shield. It was only a temporary barrier, one that would shatter the first time she experienced something like this. Mom, why is she being so rude? Emily's voice broke through Catherine's thoughts, soft but piercing with confusion. Catherine knelt down to her daughter's level, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Some people don't see us the way we see ourselves, sweetheart. It's not about who we are, it's about the walls they've built inside their own hearts. As she stood back up, Catherine's gaze met Kim's once again, and the full weight of the moment hit her. This wasn't just about a reservation. It wasn't just about being dismissed at a hotel where she had spent years pouring her soul into its success. This was about something deeper, a system of prejudice, of injustice, that existed in spaces she had fought so hard to carve out for herself. This wasn't a mistake, it was deliberate. And Catherine knew that until people like Kim were held accountable, this cycle would continue, leaving people like her and her daughter to fight for dignity in every corner of society. With a deep breath, Catherine stood a little taller, the fire inside her reigniting. She could feel Emily watching her, could feel her daughter's hope and trust resting on her shoulders. This moment wasn't just for her anymore. It was for Emily, and for everyone who had ever been treated like they didn't belong. The injustice was clear, and it was time to do something about it. Kim, Catherine said, her voice steady and resolute. Let's try this again, shall we? Catherine's patience had worn thin. As Kim Peterson continued to ignore her, Catherine's anger simmered beneath the surface, but it wasn't the kind of anger that came from frustration alone. It was the kind that came from years of being overlooked, of fighting for respect in spaces where she was never meant to thrive. She had built this hotel, this empire, from nothing, and yet here she stood, treated like a second-class citizen in her own establishment. Kim, Catherine said, her voice low but steady, I've asked you to check my reservation twice now. I'm done asking. Emily, who had been standing silently by her side, took a small step closer to her mother. She could feel the tension in the air, could see the tightness in Catherine's jaw, the way her mother was holding herself together with every ounce of strength she had left. It was a silent plea for the dignity she deserved, and it was more than Catherine had ever wanted to show her daughter. Kim didn't look up from her phone, but Catherine could see the subtle shift in her demeanor. She was aware of the confrontation now, aware of Catherine's unwavering gaze. Kim's fingers hesitated over the keyboard for a moment, but she quickly dismissed it, shrugging as if the situation were insignificant. "Like I said, ma'am, the system's fine. I don't know what you expect me to do." The words hit Catherine like a punch to the gut. Kim was not just dismissing her reservation, she was dismissing her as a person, as if the simple fact of being black made her unworthy of service. Kim wasn't just indifferent. She was actively ignoring her, in a way that was all too familiar to Catherine, a microcosm of the larger world that had never truly accepted her, no matter how much she accomplished. Catherine felt a wave of emotion wash over her, but she swallowed it back, refusing to let Kim see her break. "You know," Catherine said, her tone still measured but with an edge of steel now, "it's not just the reservation that's the problem here, is it?" Kim glanced up finally, her face betraying the slightest flicker of discomfort. "What are you talking about? You're treating me this way because you've decided I don't belong here," Catherine continued, her voice firm but calm. "You've decided, in the blink of an eye, that I'm not worth your time. But here's the thing, Kim, I don't need your approval. I'm the one who built this place." Kim's expression faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure, the smugness creeping back. "I don't know what you're talking about. The system's just not working." Catherine stepped forward, her presence undeniable now. "No, Kim, you're not working. You decided that a person like me wasn't worth the effort to serve. And you've done this before, haven't you? You've done it to others. Well, I'm not just going to stand here and let it happen." Kim blinked rapidly, a nervous glance passing over Catherine's face. The realization was dawning on her. She had crossed a line. She hadn't just dismissed a customer. She had underestimated someone who was not about to let this go. Catherine's next words were a final, decisive statement. "You've just deleted my reservation, and you're going to fix it. Now, or we're going to have a bigger problem on our hands." The silence that followed hung heavy in the air, the tension palpable. Kim swallowed hard, and for the first time, she seemed unsure, even intimidated. Catherine wasn't just a guest. She wasn't just a customer. She was someone who would not be silenced. And in that moment, Kim knew it. Catherine stood there, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths, refusing to let the adrenaline rushing through her veins take control. She had reached her breaking point. Kim Peterson had crossed a line, and Catherine was done. This wasn't just about one mistake or one reservation. It was about the underlying attitudes that had long been ignored, the kind of subtle racism that had woven itself into the very fabric of the hotel she had built. The time for patience was over. "Kim," Catherine said, her voice as calm as it was firm, "I'm not asking for your help anymore. I'm asking for you to fix what you've done." Kim shifted uncomfortably, clearly beginning to realize the severity of the situation. She hesitated, eyes darting to the side, not able to meet Catherine's gaze. "What do you mean?" she muttered, her voice laced with uncertainty now, but there was still a hint of defiance. "I told you the system." "I don't care about your excuses anymore," Catherine cut in, her tone hardening. "You've deleted my reservation, and worse, you've dismissed me like I'm invisible. Like I don't belong here. You've done this to other guests, haven't you?" Her eyes never left Kim, forcing her to face the reality of what she'd been doing. Kim blinked rapidly, her face paling as the weight of Catherine's words sank in. I didn't mean." "You didn't mean what, Kim?" Catherine interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "That you've been treating people unfairly? That you've been letting your own biases take control of how you treat customers?" The silence that followed was thick, uncomfortable. Catherine could see Kim trying to find a way out, some excuse to escape responsibility. But this time, Catherine wouldn't let her. She wasn't just standing up for herself anymore. She was standing up for the countless others who had been silently pushed aside, whose voices had never been heard. "I've seen the complaints," Catherine continued, her voice growing more controlled but no less firm. "Not just from me. From others too. Racial discrimination, poor service, negligence. This is systemic, and it stops today. You're fired, Kim." For a moment, Kim stood there, stunned, her face a mixture of disbelief and shock. "You can't," she stammered, but Catherine cut her off. "Oh, I can," Catherine said, her words sharp. "You may have thought you could hide behind your position, but I'm not going to let that slide." You've been a problem for far too long." Kim's hands trembled as she tried to respond, but no words came out. Catherine didn't need to hear another word. The decision was made. She wasn't going to allow someone like Kim to continue in a role where they had the power to dismiss people just because they didn't like who they were. Turning toward the manager's office, Catherine motioned for Stephen Lane, the hotel manager, to join her. He appeared almost immediately, his nervous expression betraying the fact that he had seen this coming. He knew exactly why Kim was being fired, and yet he stood frozen, clearly unsure of how to handle it. "Stephen," Catherine said, her voice calm but with an unmistakable authority, "you've known about Kim's behavior for months. You've let it slide, let it fester. I won't allow this hotel, this empire I built, to continue turning a blind eye to what's been happening here. You're going to handle this situation, starting with her termination. Right now." Stephen nodded, swallowing hard. He stepped forward, his hands shaking as he approached Kim. "I'm sorry, but you're fired." The words hung in the air, final and resolute. Kim blinked, stunned into silence, her expression a mix of anger and embarrassment. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. Slowly, she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the now quiet lobby. As the door closed behind Kim, Catherine stood tall. She had taken the first step toward making real change. The battle wasn't over, but she had set the wheels of justice in motion. The system was broken, but Catherine was determined to fix it, one piece at a time. The time for quiet tolerance was over. Catherine stood by the window in her office, the weight of the day still pressing on her shoulders. The soft murmur of the hotel lobby below seemed distant, almost irrelevant now. The usual noise of guests, the clinking of glasses, and the shuffle of footsteps all blended together, but Catherine barely noticed. The world outside continued on, but she was frozen in a moment of quiet reflection, contemplating everything that had transpired. Her thoughts drifted back to the confrontation with Kim Peterson, the moment when she had stood her ground and demanded justice. Not just for herself, but for every other person who had been disrespected, dismissed, or ignored because of their race. That moment had been more than just a firing. It was a statement. Catherine had always known that racism wasn't just an isolated incident. It was systemic, woven into the very fabric of society. But this time, she had taken action. She had made her stand, not only for herself but for Emily and for every guest who had been treated unfairly in this hotel. As Catherine glanced at her reflection in the glass, she realized something. The fire in her that had been burning for so long, the desire to fight for what was right, had finally found its focus. This wasn't just about making her hotel run smoothly. It was about making sure that her business, her empire, stood for something more than luxury and wealth. It had to stand for respect, equality, and justice. "Mom, are you okay?" Emily's voice interrupted Catherine's thoughts. She turned around, seeing her daughter standing in the doorway, her eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and concern. The sight of Emily, still in her school clothes, brought a pang to Catherine's heart. She had always tried to protect her daughter from the ugly realities of the world, but today, Emily had witnessed firsthand what it meant to be treated unfairly simply because of the color of their skin. "I'm okay," Catherine said softly, her voice tinged with exhaustion. She walked toward Emily and took a deep breath, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. I've been carrying this weight for so long, and it feels like maybe, just maybe, I did something today that could change things. For all of us." Emily nodded slowly, her eyes wide, as if trying to process everything that had just happened. "I saw how strong you were, Mom. I'm proud of you." Catherine smiled faintly, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "You don't need to be proud of me. You deserve to live in a world where you're not treated like that. You deserve to be seen, just as you are. We all do." As she spoke those words, Catherine felt something shift within her. The anger that had fueled her earlier was still there, but now it was tempered with a sense of purpose. The road ahead would be long, and she knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time in a long while, she felt hopeful. Catherine sat down at her desk, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the phone. She knew what needed to be done next. She dialed the number for the hotel's corporate office, her fingers steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. It was time to take the next step, to ensure that no one would ever be treated like Kim had treated her. It was time for a full-scale audit. Every employee, every system, every process, it all needed to be reevaluated. "Hello, this is Catherine Wilson," she said as the phone rang, her voice steady but firm. "I'm initiating a full review of the hotel's policies, including all guest complaints and staff behavior. I want every employee evaluated, every issue addressed. No exceptions." She paused, listening to the response, and then added, "This isn't just about fixing things. This is about making sure we never let something like this happen again." As the conversation continued, Catherine's mind raced. She knew that change wouldn't happen overnight, and there would be resistance, but she also knew that she couldn't sit idly by. Kim's actions were just the tip of the iceberg. The hotel, her hotel, had to stand for more than just luxury. It had to stand for something better. Hanging up the phone, Catherine leaned back in her chair, her gaze fixed on the city skyline. The world outside seemed so large, so filled with possibilities. And for the first time in a long while, Catherine knew that the fight for change wasn't something that had to be done alone. She had the power to make a difference, to carve out a space where people like her could thrive, not just survive. Emily stepped forward and sat next to her mother, a quiet understanding passing between them. "You've made a big difference, Mom." "I know it." Catherine nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "We've made a difference." From the story of Catherine Wilson, we learn a profound lesson about the power of standing up against injustice, no matter how deep-rooted it may seem. Catherine's journey was not just about one unfair incident at her hotel, but a reflection of a larger truth, that systemic racism and discrimination often thrive in silence, hidden behind seemingly small actions. When Catherine was dismissed by Kim Peterson, her realization wasn't just about the reservation being deleted. It was about the years of underestimation and mistreatment she had silently endured, and worse, had been allowing to continue in her own space. The key lesson here is that we all have a responsibility, especially those in positions of power, to confront injustice head-on. Catherine could have easily let the situation go, buried it under the guise of a simple mistake, but she chose to take a stand, not only for herself but for others who may not have the courage to speak up. By holding Kim accountable and demanding a system-wide change, she not only addressed the issue at hand, but ensured that this cycle of disrespect would not continue. In a world where it's easy to turn a blind eye or dismiss others' pain as insignificant, Catherine teaches us that the fight for dignity and respect is never truly over. Each moment of silence or tolerance in the face of discrimination allows it to grow stronger. But standing up like Catherine did is how we begin to tear down those walls. It's how we pave the way for a more just and respectful world, one where every person, no matter their background or skin color, is valued equally. Ultimately, the real victory in Catherine's story is not just her personal triumph, but the lasting impact she leaves behind, a commitment to fairness, equality, and standing strong for what is right. Have you ever experienced or witnessed a moment where you were unfairly judged or dismissed because of your race, background, or appearance? How did you handle it, and what do you think needs to change in society to ensure that everyone is treated with the respect and dignity they deserve? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. Let's start an open conversation about standing up against injustice, supporting each other, and creating a more inclusive world. Don't forget to like, share, and spread the message. If you found this story meaningful and powerful, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel, Unlocking Chains. Together, we can continue to spark important conversations, challenge injustices, and inspire change. Join our community, and stay connected for more stories that matter.